I'm absolutely delighted to have these four individuals here with us today to talk about a subject that is so much grander in scope than we could possibly address all the elements of today. But I think it's important to introduce you to four individuals who are and have the potential to play a significant role on the subject of foreign direct investment, both in the United States and outbound from the United States. To my immediate left, Patricia Menendez-Cambo. Patricia is the global chair of the law firm Greenburg, Traurig, headquartered in Miami, but on a plane to everywhere, every day, or so it seems. Patricia. Rene, Pierre, Azria, to your far left. Rene Pierre is the founder and CEO of Tegris Advisors, a veteran from Rothschild, and an individual who I've come to learn and love, who truly enjoys nothing more than an incredibly complicated transaction. I think the more complicated, the better. Susan Segal, to Patricia's left, I'm sure many of you know and certainly would know her institution. Susan is the president and CEO of the American Society and Council of the Americas. And Susan brings both a banking background and in her current capacity has the opportunity to be both a voyeur of and an influencer on policy and business activities between countries. Tian has become a great friend of the M&A advisor through the last 4 years. Lawrence is considered the father of the Chinese market economy, having brought the futures exchange model to China and the establishment of CIFCO, the futures exchange, for those transactions, affording him the opportunity to become a very successful entrepreneur and an individual that continues to give back greatly to both his own country and the facilitation of trade and investment between China and the United States. So I think we have a tremendous group here who bring experience and expertise, and I know we'll enjoy sharing with you their outlook for foreign direct investment in the year ahead.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. And thank you, Susan. Thank you, Lawrence. And thank you, Rene, here for agreeing to participate in this panel. I'm up here with a tremendous amount of expertise in advising clients on direct foreign investment on a global basis. There's a collective of number of years of experience and complexity in transactions, in my panelists that I think will bring a lot of interesting debate and discussion. So I prepared the session to talk a little bit about the effect of FDI, what's happening right now, what you think is going to happen in the future, and so we're going to go about it on a regional basis. To the extent that you have any questions or anything, please let me know along the way. I want to make it a little interactive. With respect, Rene Pierre, one of the groups of high performers, including Spain, Ireland, Belgium, and Finland, have been able to attract significantly more projects than historically before. What do you think is the prognosis for Europe, given its recent crisis, and is the investment in some of these countries having been overlooked in light of what's going on with Europe, or do you think there's opportunities for next year?
I think what we were saying late last year, was that Europe was a bit like Toys R Us, and anybody who wanted to look for bargains should probably be looking at Spain, Italy, maybe Ireland, and it is actually what happened, except to some extent in Spain, in Italy. Spain has attracted twice as much investment as the year before. Ireland 2 or 3 times as much. And the northern countries, Netherlands, Germany, to some extent France, have seen a huge decline of investment. The UK has become, in the first 6 months of 2013, the largest recipient of FDI in the world, which used to be the bank of the US. The UK got something like $76 billion of FDI, a lot of it from China, and a lot of it from this country, of course. I think we're going to see more of the same trend next year, with probably, if I can talk for a second about Africa, the reversal of a trend in Africa. The trend in Africa today is that the net FDI into Africa has actually gone down in terms of growth by 5% from the first 6 months this year, first month last year. And it's primarily due to the collapse of investment in war-torn areas, Egypt in particular, and Tunisia. On the other hand, Algeria is booming because of oil and gas. Nigeria is suffering from the governance issues and to some extent of the religious conflicts. And South Africa is booming. So within Africa, there is already a selection being made by investors as to where to invest and where to basically take money off. We're going to see more of those trends, I think, in 2014, accentuated, of course, by the arbitraging of the currencies. And maybe we'll talk about that later.
We see a lot of growth in Africa as well. I mean, Africa as a continent per se, depending on how you count it, whether it's 52 or 54 countries, they themselves are not come to agreement with that. But do you think that these select early stage investments in, let's say, the top 10 or 12 countries, which are the ones that are seeing positive inflows into Africa, do you think that this is a good environment for the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's an excellent environment. For two reasons, I think. Walmart has opened the way to South Africa with their multi-billion-dollar investment, and they're being followed by the suppliers of Walmart. When you speak to large consumer goods companies and the packaged goods companies in this country, they are following Walmart. That's the way it's always been. Also, there are new investors in oil and gas in Africa. The hedge funds in particular have put money there, and the private equity guys. Blackstone has large investments in countries. I can certify to you, I worked at Blackstone many years ago. I can certify to you that 20 years ago, nobody had ever heard of these countries at Blackstone. And now Blackstone has multi-billion-dollar oil and gas exploration projects over there, shipping projects, etc. Same for Carlyle, same. And it's going to continue on the same trend. I mean, what could change is what is happening in North Africa. North Africa today attracts money primarily from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, and money from France has dried up, and that could change when Italy gets back some of its economic strength. Italy will again invest in Algerian gas, so I think that there may be a change there. Egypt is probably top four.
Okay, going from one emerging market to what was an emerging market but has been the star of the decade. And Susan, when I were in Davos, not this last year, the forum declared it the decade of Latin America. And Latin America, for a third year in a row, continues to attract a positive foreign direct investment, even in areas, even at a time when countries are seeing negative numbers for inflows, and given some of the political instability that has been as well in Argentina. I mean, notwithstanding that, there still has been a positive thing. So what do you think is the growth for Latin America?
I think that, FDI increased in the first half of 2013 across Latin America as a whole. I think what you're seeing in Latin America and what you're going to continue to see, first of all, we have to disaggregate countries. So about over half of that FDI was really Brazil. A good piece of that was Mexico, and then the balance were the remainder of the countries. I think that will continue, although I think that with the liberalization of energy, if energy reform in Mexico really gets implemented and really happens on a large scale, I think the numbers in Mexico will explode, because people will see Mexico energy exploration as a huge opportunity given NAFTA, a contiguous border with the United States, North America, and everything that goes along with that. And what you're seeing in Latin America right now, which I think is critical, is really the growth of the middle class. And when you have a growth of the middle class, you have the growth of consumers. And so you have an explosion of consumers. So if you look year over year, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, there is definitely, for many countries, more of a negative feeling today than there was in 2011 or 2010. But my basic view on Latin America is it wasn't as good as everybody thought it was in 2010 and 2011, and it is not as bad as some people think it is now. And if you look at Latin America over a decade, and you are a foreign direct investor and you're buying because you see the long-term opportunity of a rising middle class, a growing consumer market, a very energy-rich continent, whether it be agriculture, where many countries, even Argentina and Brazil, have a competitive advantage in things like agro-tech, let's call it. Clearly, look at a country like Argentina, which, and you look at Vaca Muerta and shale. It's one of the largest producers or opportunities for shale anywhere in the world. I think that you're going to see a lot more FDI going in, but you're going to have to look over a long term and not say, am I making money in 2 years or not. The other really big opportunity in Latin America is infrastructure. Latin America is number one, most countries aren't connected. You look at a place like Brazil, there's short roads, there's short ports, there's short railroads. The logistics on all of the major rivers don't exist. So there are enormous opportunities in infrastructure, and you're beginning to see through these bidding processes, even places like Paraguay, it's going to grow 13% this year. It's an explosion in terms of people that have interest in the agricultural and infrastructure in Latin America. So there's inter-regional interest or inter-country interest, and then there is the infrastructure to connect the entire continent. You look at the Pacific Alliance, the 4 major countries on the Pacific, from Mexico to Chile, exclude Ecuador, and you see other opportunities to connect. So I think there are a lot of potential opportunities for FDI. And one final comment, which is the rise of the multi-Latina. And that is the Latin American company that wants to invest outside of Latin America. And if you're a Mexican company, a lot of outside of Latin America means in the United States. And you're going to see more and more of that. I mean, Odebrecht, Odebrecht from Brazil, a Mexichem from Mexico. These are multinational companies investing around the world, and I think you will see more and more of that over time.
Lawrence, and what is your perspective looking at it with your expertise of China and looking at FDI? China has directed a lot of the FDI, a lot of the growth into Latin America. It had virtually zero investment in the U.S. and it has grown to $67 billion according to some of the recent statistics. And it's also becoming a stronger player in Europe. What do you think the perspective from China looks like?
I have been in the business area for the last 30 years, and in my experience, it never happened like today. And China investors looking for the outside. And the problem next year in the FDI and inbound and outbound FDI will over inbound FDI. This is the first time probably next year. But this year, and I think I saw that China investment go global, and most of the investment focus on Europe. Like you said, in UK, probably China is a bigger player. So, and the reason probably why the China investment focus on Europe, I think the major reason is political risk, because there are many countries and each country is smaller. So they're looking for the investment. Just like the last month, the president of the UK came to Beijing and to attract the Chinese investors there. So I heard of many of my friends, they're they would like to invest in Europe in different industry, agriculture and the fashion and the telecom and TMT. So this is something I saw. But for United States, I think there's tremendous opportunity for next year, maybe next 5 to 10 years. The reason is that this year, there's several deals so famous in China. And the first deal has big influence in China, which is the China company acquired A.O. Smith company. And the company in China goes through this merger acquisition and become the largest pork producer in the world. So because the company, the Shuanghui company is number one in the pork producer in China, and the Shuanghui acquired the Smithfield, which is the largest pork producer here, and the two biggest producers come together, and the volume is over $7 billion US. So this has never happened. So this deal finally be approved by the U.S. government, by the citizens. That gives more confidence to China investors. And the second deal probably is AMC deal, which is an intertradable deal. And one of the largest China real estate developer and acquired AMC 100%. And I think this deal has been going very well. And yesterday they go IPO in New York Stock Exchange. So this is the first time, and the China investor invests the company here, and the company is distressed assets. But just 2 years later, China investor turned this company to IPO. This is another model. So I think those two Chinese companies merged. They are so famous in China. They did a successful deal in the United States. That gave the meaningful the expectation. And the last deal I would like to mention is the real estate deal. And tomorrow I will attend the celebration for a Chinese company acquired the JP Morgan building. The JP Morgan headquarters building located downtown area, and one of the China's largest private company called Fergusson Group acquired this building and spent $700 billion more to acquire the 100% interest. And this is the first time and the biggest deal in the real estate area. Those three deals are so successful here. So that gave the China investors more confidence. So I saw a lot of the Chinese companies, they come to the United States to see different area, and they're not just to buy the real estate. They take a look at the mobile industry and non-mobile, auto industry, fashion, and the machinery, and the oil, gas, and even for school. So I think that I can clearly say that the outbound FDI will came to the United States more than before. Probably every year, almost a double. This is a great opportunity.
That's very exciting. And do you have any thoughts about China's investment in Latin America, continued Latin America, and raw material and resources?
Yes. I agree with you, and you just mentioned about the Mexico and the case, and the Mexico changed the policy. I just read the newspaper. I immediately think about that because I know lots of the oil gas companies. They're prepared to get into the market here in the United States, but it's made difficult to acquire the large size player, large size company here, oil gas company. But in Mexico, may be possible. I think the government changed the policy.
but you're not going to be allowed to acquire Pemex. You're going to be allowed to risk share in new fields.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're not. Pemex is going to remain owned by the state.
Yes.
At this point, there could be a referendum, there could be a change of constitution, but then I think you'd see something that would look more like.
Yeah. I think as a first step, initial step, they don't want to acquire big company. They just
Right.
want to test the market
Right.
to try to acquire some mid-sized, small-sized company. And
Services company.
yes. But also in Brazil, I saw there are many agriculture companies come to Brazil to plant agriculture products. So this is one of the things I saw. And for the natural resource, of course, I think it's a great area, and the Chinese company looking for getting.
Okay, there's been a lot of news in the news, and this is a question for all three of you, with respect to Brazil and the restructuring and the possibility of having restructured debt and restructured investments, and the decrease in growth for the country. Some people think that this is just an adjustment that was long overdue, and that it continues on the path. And other people think that, it's a sign of the historical issues that were in Brazil maybe 15 years ago. What are your thoughts on that, Susan?
Well, Brazil growth 2% this year. Some people are saying that maybe next year it'll grow 2.5% to 3%. There's an election in October of 2014, so there'll be campaigning running up to that election. But you'll also have the World Cup, which will bring a lot of excitement to Brazil, which will start. I guess it's the 11th of June and run through the middle of July. All of these things in the context of Brazil are very important. The psychology of the World Cup and how Brazil does in the World Cup also will have something to do with growth, believe it or not, in the country. I think that Brazil needs to restructure, has several areas in which the country needs to restructure. It is very cumbersome to do business in Brazil. The rules of the game are not clear. The tax rules are not clear. If you want to do business in Brazil, you need to spend a lot of time and money to figure it out. And I think that you have seen that while, for example, the sale of concessions, the last couple ones have done pretty well, I think there has been a lot of discussion as to whether or not they could have done even better at a different price point and under different circumstances. So I am a believer that there are several areas which Brazil needs to focus on. It is still a very closed economy. I don't necessarily think that we in the United States can criticize it that much, because actually Brazil looks very similar to the United States in the 50s. If you look at the percentage of exports to GDP, it is very similar to the United States. But I think that these are many things today which there are many areas which need to be solved. They're at probably a capacity of monetary, the effectiveness of just using monetary policy. So there are structural reforms that are going to need to take place in the country if Brazil is going to realize its complete growth potential, in my opinion.
Rene, Pierre, what do you think?
I think Susan is absolutely right. I think the main issue for Brazil is protectionism. Has always been super protectionist economy, and the day Brazil finally moves to a market economy, open economy, the whole continent will change. The whole continent will blossom and flourish, but I'm not sure it will ever happen. It's been, as you said, in the 50s it was okay. 70 years later, it's still the way it was in the 50s.
And it's very bureaucratic.
Terrible.
I can't control myself, I must ask, what do you think is going to happen in Venezuela? given the fact that they were historically, not currently, a major energy player in the market. They see the entrance of Colombia into the energy market. They see Mexico City finally showing serious and deep signs of opening up the marketplace. But they have, historical issues. What do you think that will happen in Venezuela as far as FDI in that sector? And do you think that they will turn it around?
They need a revolution, a real one. A real one. A righteous revolution to get rid of all the crooks that have been plundering the country for the last 10, 15 years.
Patty, I think that the big news on the energy front is the United States. The fact that the United States is energy self-sufficient. 5 years ago, we would not have ever believed this as to be the case. And so now what we're looking at with energy reform in Mexico is a completely and totally, between Canada, the United States, and Mexico, a self-sufficient North American energy bloc. And what that really means for competitiveness of North America is astonishing. To me, that is the really interesting game. If you look at Mexico today, Mexico's industrialized exports are globally competitive. And the proximity to the largest market in the world, the United States, makes it even more, the transportation costs more competitive in manufacturing with rising salaries in China. Mexico has become very, very competitive. And so I think that, we have a number of game changers, but energy in North America and the competitiveness is really, really a game changer and one of the most interesting things that we have in front of us.
I agree with you, Susan, and I think it's gonna, that'll change significantly the demographics and, of the Americas as a region, per se. Bumping back a little bit to Europe, Rene, Pierre, what are your thoughts on Eastern Europe? And, for now, they've managed to have somewhat of a limited effect, vis-a-vis the crisis in Europe. It wasn't as difficult as it was for some of the other countries. But how do you think that they will play out as far as foreign investment and as growth markets in Poland, in Central Europe?
The countries are very contrasted. I mean, look at the Ukraine, 45 million people. It's a huge country, completely not torn anymore, but now compressed between the two blocks. And still in the Ukraine, you have investors, a lot of interested investors because of the large local population and of the low price of assets, right? So you have buyers coming from Poland, you have buyers coming from Czech Republic, you have the local oligarchs, you have people coming from Russia, the Russian Federation, and so on and so forth. Bulgaria, Romania are more interesting to and the Balkans, by the way, are more interesting to Italy or to Turkey as buyers, or to Israel as buyers, because of proximities and the easier political, situation in a way. For all these countries in general, the issue or the main set of issues is not of a regulatory nature; it is of a political nature. Whereas I think in Western Europe, if you wanted to compare things in a very rough way, the issues to FDI are of a regulatory nature, right? I mean, the complete change that has been going on in the insurance, banking, and other financial, areas of other areas of financial industry have restricted the FDI in Western Europe. At the same time, what Susan said is very true. I mean, there's a cumulative effect of what's going on here on the energy side, which means that greenfield, in FDI there is M&A and then there's greenfield projects. Greenfield projects in Western Europe are plummeting, especially because all these, chemical companies are coming here to invest money and start new facilities instead of trying to trade. So FDI is coming at the expense of trade in that particular in the particular sector of chemicals. I mean, there are many other aspects and things we could talk about, but I think these are some of the highlights.
Susan, your thoughts on that?
I just wanted to make one comment because I've been thinking a lot about, what does Latin America look like in terms of FDI? And I think Latin America is very appealing for FDI. But, the world is beginning to shift a little bit because people are now saying maybe the U.S. is going to grow at 3 and 3.5%, and on average, maybe Latin America is going to grow at 4%. So in some ways, the biggest competition for investment in the world is the United States. The United States growing at 3 to 3.5% at a time when we're going to begin to unwind the stimulus. So a lot of emerging markets are going to have volatility based on that, with everything going on in energy and clear rules that if we can resist changing the rules of the game in this country and changing the tax code and changing a lot of things and becoming more bureaucratic, we're still the most innovative country in the world. So if you put all that together, I think a lot of the competition for investment is right here for emerging markets and for Europe, is right here in the United States, with companies saying, well, gee, maybe I should either stay here or I should invest here, and there are a lot of opportunities. So, I think that's the big, when I was just recently in Singapore, and Singaporean companies were talking about the United States. Sure, they're investing in Latin America, but it's a much smaller percentage than the kinds of numbers they were talking about for investment in Lawrence. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, I think that you're right, and because the energy revolution and the U.S. market become more attractive, and even though in China and many people think about to move their need to invest in greenfield, and one of my friend who is one of the biggest steel mill, and he just phoned me last week and said, okay. And I think that in the United States, the gas is so cheap, the electricity is so cheap. Why don't I set up the steel mill in the United States? Can you find a place for me? So the things happen.
The revival of the steel belt.
What goes around comes around. So I wanted to give a little bit of time to the audience to see if you had any questions of our panelists.
We have time for one question. Sorry.
One question. All right. Thanks.
Susan, any thoughts or comments on Peru as a...
Well, Peru, interestingly enough, if you look at Peru over the last 5 years, it's actually grown faster than China. And this year it will grow less than it's grown in past years, but it's still going to grow 6%, 6.5%, and it'll be potentially one of the fastest growing. If you net out Panama and you net out Paraguay, it'll probably be the fastest growing market in Latin America in 2014. I think that it has become a very attractive country for FDI. There are a lot of opportunities, energy, infrastructure. Of course, it faces Asia. So if you think about the way goods are transported, there's been a lot of Brazilian investment, for example, in Peru, because they see Peru as a place to take the goods as a stopover ultimately to Asia. I also think we haven't really spent much time talking about the Pacific Alliance, which is Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile. If this holds, this is an enormous opportunity. This is a market which is as large as Brazil, basically, both in terms of people and GDP. The difference, however, between that and a European Union, forget the politics, is that there's a lot of interregional commerce in Europe. There's very little interregional commerce. I think interregional commerce in those 4 countries accounts for something like 3%. So there's an enormous opportunity for these countries themselves to integrate and have commerce, and Peru would be part of that. Finally, I think we also need to think about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is also very, very important for this continued growth. So I see good economic growth. I see political stability in the country. And so I see as a real place for investment and opportunity.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry we didn't have time for any more questions, but if you have any questions, feel free to come up to us. Thank you very much.